All right, we can get started. A warm welcome to everyone who's joining us today in our ambitious series with Jacques that we are running this week and next Monday. And the edition today is about communication. So we are looking at practical, actionable ways of using AI and GPT and similar tools for communications professionals. So we have 45 minutes, and in respect of everyone's time and the material we want to cover, it's going to be a somewhat fast-paced rhythm, but the recording will be shared with you afterwards, and most of the slides as well. If there is any technical issue, feel free to refresh the app or the browser in which you're watching this. You can also download the Click Meeting app, and there's a meeting ID that you need to enter, and that will take you here. But usually just switching a browser or refreshing would do the trick. I encourage you to use the chat box. So please put any question or any comment into it. And so we usually do an open question at this point to ask you where you're dialing in from. So you are welcome to put that in and see how geographically diverse the audience is right now. So put into the chat box to be familiar with the chat interface, which city, which country you're joining us from. And many of you are certainly in Brussels, but we see there is from wonderful Bilbao, from India all the way. That's interesting. From Slovakia, many from Brussels, and Bonn, Germany, and Bosnia. So many interesting and beautiful places. So we are glad to have you here. And without further ado, Jacques, you probably want to say a few words about your background and what got you into this field.
Absolutely. Well, welcome everyone for the session. My name is Jacques Foul. I'm a digital communication consultant. I've worked in the Brussels bubble for many years in agencies, in advertising agencies. And now I'm super passionate about AI and how we can use AI to save time in communications. So this session is really special to me and to my experience. So hopefully you get a lot of helpful insights today.
Excellent. Well, Jacques is really the master of many of the things that we will present to you today. My background is closer to the EU institutions and EU exams. Some of you might know my work with EU training and the ultimate EU test book. And I've been dealing with training and helping public affairs professionals, communication professionals, and advocacy experts to get to the next level. And that brought me to rebrand my training company and call it Influence Builders, because we're looking at leveraging technology to gain more influence, to spread the good message that you all are tasked with spreading as communicators and communication professionals. Jacques, you want to take this?
Sure. So what have we been up to for the past 6 months or the past year? Basically, we've been training over 100 public affairs and communication professionals. So training them on how to use AI, what tools to use, and some of the techniques that we've been using too. We've also created a custom workshops. So if you have specific needs in AI when it comes to your team, with your communications, or your public affairs practice, then we can help you with that. The waitlist is open. We've also launched a monthly Substack newsletter. So if you want to have more in-depth reviews on what is going in the AI space when it relates to public affairs, then there's a place for that too. And then we've been publishing also almost daily AI tips and tricks on LinkedIn. So if you want to learn more about AI in our space, then you can just follow us on LinkedIn.
Very well. And just to give a context about the series, as I mentioned earlier, there's an edition that we had on Monday for trade associations. So if your role is in a trade association, you might want to check it out. We have another one for NGOs, the recording of which will be put online on the Influence Builders website fairly soon. We had an edition yesterday for EU officials, today for comms professionals. Tomorrow, we're looking at consultants, and then on Monday, members of parliament and their accredited assistants. And one word on what we are not going to cover today is to be sure to set the expectations right. Our focus is not the AI Act and not the policy issues. These are obviously very important political and policy initiatives, but it's not the focus. AI ethics is also really quintessential to everything we are discussing here. But given our focus today and the priorities, we said, okay, we're going to put that aside and find a different form or time to talk about that. Same thing with AI's impact on society and jobs, which is an extremely important topic for another time. Perhaps we're going to organize some panel discussion or similar format on that. And the last point is that we are tool agnostic. And by that, we mean ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, which is a Claude, the Sonnet 3.5. Those are all excellent tools. We're looking at the ways you can prompt them, you can harness them for your work, regardless of which tool you are actually using, because the methods are pretty similar in all cases. And the aim is to spark your curiosity, to get you experimenting, and not just experimenting in a random manner, but more deliberately with a more conscious goal to say, this is what I'd like to get out of it. What's the best way to harness these tools and inspire ambitions in a way that will get you thinking, say, hey, maybe I could do that in my organization. Maybe we could take it a step further, introduce automations, create custom GPTs, create some custom apps powered by AI tools. So a couple of best practices when using AI, and that is going to be presented by Jacques.
Yes, just a minute. So the best practices for using AI, there are many of them, so we're going to go through them right now. The first one relates to data privacy. So data privacy is one of the key issues when it comes to AI. A lot of organizations are really shy to be using these tools because of the information and the data they're sharing into these AI tools. So we always recommend two things. So first, to be very cautious as to the information you're sharing in these tools. So trying to anonymize some of the content you're using might help. The second one would be to go into the settings of the AI tools that you have and to make sure that these AI tools are not being trained based on the data that you provide. So for example, here you have an example. In ChatGPT, you can simply go into the settings, the data control settings, and make sure that OpenAI is not using your data to train its models. That's something you can easily click, and then it's pretty much saved that way. But we always recommend that you also keep sensitive information out of your prompts to make sure that AI is not using your data.
One idea, if I can jump in for a second, is you can consider sanitizing your data. So you can still use it, but you may be able to remove certain personally identifiable information or really sensitive information while keeping the rest of the data set or document or PDF useful or helpful as an input into your tool.
And then we had a question for you. So what challenges have you faced when using AI and ChatGPT in your work? So please type in the chatbot, maybe some obstacles, challenges you've been facing when using AI tools.
And just to say, we've been asking many people about that. So there are quite a few recurring themes, it seems. So let's see what those are for you, especially in the comms space that we are focusing on today. So limits, maybe even say more about what those limits are for you. What else? Please type in. All right. The prompting, not to get cliche generic answers. I think just as a side note, while you're all typing that in, I think we've all seen those blatantly obvious GPT driven or GPT drafted texts and articles, and it just causes a lot of frustration for many people. But that is not necessarily how it needs to be.
Yes, and it seems from the messages that there's something about generic answers or something that the standardized answers. That's also what I'm reading. Restrictions on the tools used, getting the right angle. Too limited results when brainstorming. So those are really great examples of limitations, and these are the examples we also had from other sessions. So really interesting to see the patterns. Maybe Andras, you can talk a little bit more about the your work.
Yes. So in that context, and Jacques is going to go very hands-on and very practical as to how you can configure the system in a way that minimizes what they call hallucinations, that it minimizes the very cliched way of giving you answers. But before that, a few words on the slide, which is my brainchild, more of a thought experiment that I did when I was thinking about the ways AI tools can and are being used. And I gave it the name Maslow Pyramid of AI use. There's a certain hierarchy there where on the very basic level, you can do a lot of fun and entertainment things, which are that you instruct AI to take the EU's chemical strategy and turn that into a haiku poem. And that's fun and great, but doesn't have a lot of business applicability, though you may turn that into some easy, lighthearted communication piece in some form. On a more serious note, task automation. So simply proofreading or summarization, maybe with a twist to make it then adapted to the particular audience you are communicating to or with. So you can do that sort of customization. But on a little more advanced level, you can optimize workflows. You can set up automations, or you can set up certain sequencing of how you draft a certain email using AI and then customize it to different audiences. And Jacques has some examples there. But the most interesting bit is the one I put in purple, brainstorming and concept creation, cross-referencing different materials. You say, well, here's our companies, if you're working for a company or in a consultancy, our clients' advocacy goals, and overlap that with a European Parliamentary Committee's agenda and say, okay, how do these two come together? Give me some analysis, give me ideas how I can engage, or how can I create certain messages for that particular field. And then the kind of the cherry on the cake there is specialized tools. And that doesn't mean you need to have any true deep technical expertise, but there are off-the-shelf tools for meeting note transcription, or other tools which are custom chatbots that you can create for your organization or client, where you can feed in templates of the output. You can feed in tone, you can feed in style guides, and all of this can be then created for new content, and it saves you a lot of time and saves you a lot of effort in most cases. And one point there, I was experimenting with, there is this new Google experimental tool called Notebook LM, where you can feed in even large documents, so several dozens, if not 100-page documents, and you can interact with those. You can create FAQs that may be helpful for your website or your organization's relevant pages. You can create briefings if part of your comms role is to generate a briefing for the leadership of your organization. So that's a pretty good way of extracting substantial, or let's say qualitative information. So it's not your Control F or Command F finding keywords, but it's understanding the meaning, and especially when you put in different documents. So here I put in the mission letters of the commissioner designates, the executive vice president commissioner designates. And it can blend these together in a way and extract information in a way that will be highly relevant for you. So for internal work and even knowledge sharing internally within your network, your organization, your communications agency, this is super helpful stuff. And again, the confidentiality can be a tricky thing to pay attention to, but there are so many other use cases when this is helpful. And one thing I wanted to showcase here, it's an experiment that we are working on, which is creating virtual personas and focus groups. So we have crafted, for now 10, but we're going to make it more sophisticated, virtual personas for message testing, as if they were a real life flesh and blood focus group. So here are the individuals with demographic information, with profile information, and even with political views, to replicate kind of archetypes of individuals in the EU bubble, Brussels bubble, in the policy community, and say, okay, if I'm an agency like the Right Street that I'm working with, to say, okay, who is the client? What sort of organization? Who is the target audience for a campaign? What's a slogan? What's a message? And then see, okay, let's upload a policy paper or a position paper and just hear what they say. Now, the point here is just to showcase that there are so many applications, so many ways to leverage, to harness the power of AI for a comms goal, for a comms perspective. So the question here, what challenge would you say, or what you hope AI can help you solve? So put that in the chat box, and I'm trusting that Jacques' examples will answer many of those aspirations. So what are you hoping that AI can help you with in your professional communications work? And yes, to Mikhail's point, and I didn't mention that, so this notebook LM with Google, it can generate a podcast conversation based on the document you feed in, which is something I did with this mission letter. So you can find that on the Influence Builder website. So it's a podcast conversation entirely pulled from the content of the document you feed in. So reducing.
So there are a couple answers yet. So being more efficient, reducing research time. Reducing time is the main theme here.
Spark imagination, creativity. Inspiration. Yes, inspiration. And it's a perfectly safe way of getting inspiration without harming your body in any way. So without substances, right? So that's a very, very good tool. And AI and GPT is extremely powerful in that regard. So,
And
Jacques.
I think, yes, so the first use that we see is producing content at scale. I think that's the number one thing, because as communicators, this is usually what we are tasked with. So not so much just text form content, but also just any form of content. So videos, audio. So here's just a list of tools that I've personally tried, especially Opus Clip. I'm going to try not to lose my voice here. But just to give you an example of AI generated tools that can help you add voiceovers, help you edit videos, can help you create images. So if you really want to think more creatively about your content and all the different types of content you can produce, then AI can be the answer for that. Another way to think about AI, or another challenge that AI can help you solve, is to think more strategically. Because at the moment, as communicators, we do a lot of different things. We write, but we also think strategically. We brainstorm, but we also create plans for specific campaigns. And I think we can have a much more decision-making roles and think a lot more strategically than we are at the moment, by simply asking AI to do all the repetitive tasks, the routine tasks, like and the tactics, like writing blogs, summarizing documents, finding trends, conducting audience research. So those are all the tactics that we do on a regular basis. Well, we can simply have AI do that, so we can elevate and focus on more strategic tasks, which are usually planning social media campaigns, drafting strategy documents, thinking about your work process. So how much time you're spending on specific activities, and also the activities you focus on. So AI can really help us just think more strategically, elevating our game, and to think about things from a more holistic level, and not so much being in the weeds on a daily basis. And AI has simply revolutionized the way we think. So now, to solve a problem or get better answers, we have to ask better questions. And this goes back to what I said earlier, is that we have to think more strategically and ask better questions. We have to we have to take a step back and look at things from a distance and see what we can optimize, and where AI can help us sort of bridge the gap and save time in the end. So we also wanted to give you sort of a sample, a few examples of everyday use cases that are really practical, that can really help you think about AI in a different way and see how you can integrate AI into your activities. So, for example, the first one is transforming documents into bite-sized social media posts. So whenever you have a report, whenever you have a press release, any type of documents that you want to convert into a different type, then you can easily do that with AI. And so here's an example of a prompt. So we usually in our prompts we focus on providing as many details as possible and focusing on the end goal, like sort of the thing that you want to achieve. So here, the idea is to convert a blog post into 3 engaging social media updates for LinkedIn. So we sort of give it a task. We also focus on the tone of voice. So the tone for LinkedIn should be professional, inspiring, highlighting key insights. And you also focus on the audience. So this is for an audience of communication professionals working in European NGOs. So this just gives you an example of like how deeply you have to go to in your prompts to get the better answers, and sort of the details you have to add to the prompt to get crystal clear as to who you're talking to and the tone of voice you should have in the specific content. The second use case is analyzing extensive documents, reports, and links. So this is something that communicators have to do on a regular basis, go through a large amount of data, large amount of documents, reports, spreadsheets, anything you can think of. And so here's a prompt, for example, to help you analyze a specific report. So analyze a report which focuses on the future of renewable energy in Europe. Summarize the findings with a focus on media trends, public opinion, and stakeholder communication strategies. So here you can see that you can basically upload any document. You can mention a specific link to a specific website and ask AI to summarize specific things or to identify specific trends or keywords or topics in the document to better understand what the topic is about. So then you can use some of the takeaways or the findings from the document in your content. So then you can add something about the tone. You can add something about your goal with this action. So here's to highlight actionable recommendations. So this gives you an idea of how you can save time when it comes to analyzing extensive documents, links, and reports.
Jacques, maybe actually, this is something I'll present, but I'll just jump in for a second with a technical footnote where providing a link to a website is usually less helpful than going to that website, especially a web page, turning that into printing it as a PDF, so saving it as a PDF, and then feeding that into ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or any other tool, but to have that as a PDF in the first place. Simply providing a link, generally the way websites are structured, it's not always obvious or easy, or at least at this point, and this might change in the near future, but at least at this point, GPT is not that great parsing a website and retrieving information the same way as it could from a PDF document. So especially when it's the content is really important for your output, you probably want to do this little trick. And then we can actually get to the next one, which I wanted to share with you. It's from EU Matrix. Many of you would certainly know, formerly called VoteWatch. So EU Matrix has these reports, and they do a lot of data analysis on voting patterns of the European Parliament and the Council. And some of it is paid, some of it is free. And I put this very ambitious question, which is a little too ambitious, but not too far off, where it says, based on the data, if the Commission is proposing a ban on diesel engines by 2035, what would be the most likely outcome of the vote in the committee? And what I want to demonstrate with this sort of approach is to expand your thinking into the capabilities of these tools, where if you can feed in good enough data, quality data, which could be voting patterns, could be Eurostat statistics, it could be so many things, that it can not only pull insights, but it can have a certain predictive, I wouldn't say it's not going to predict the future, but it can indicate certain things about what is likely to come, which you can then turn into communication pieces. Back to you, Jacques.
The third use that we identified for communications is proofreading and improving written content. So whenever you find yourself writing emails or writing reports or writing anything, actually, you can simply ask AI to proofread. For example, here in the example, the attached press release meant for distribution. Again, mention the audience, the tone of voice, what type of language you're going to use, if it's jargon-free, clear, accessible to experts and general public, just to make sure that your writing is cleaned up and ready to go for your different audiences. What I typically use when ChatGPT gives me very generic answers or just very bland language, I usually ask, be casual yet professional, or be conversational. And then this sort of makes the AI a little bit loosen up, and the language is usually much more readable and jargon-free, I would say. Another way to use AI in communications is to optimize internal workflows, processes, and tasks. So if you have a specific process in mind for doing reporting or writing content or anything like that, you can write it down, put it in ChatGPT and say, review our current communication workflow, which includes press release approvals, content production, and many other topics. And then you can basically ask AI to criticize your workflow and provide recommendations on how to improve it, or the sort of AI tools that can help you bridge the gap when it comes to saving time or changing your workflow. Another point is to automate meeting and event note-taking. So whenever you have meetings or events, you can ask AI to transcribe all the notes or the conversations and give you some takeaways using tools like Fathom AI. So I don't know if, Andras, you want to mention a few things about this tool, or?
I mean, this is becoming pretty standard as we go ahead, and most meetings are going to have some sort of an AI note taker. Part of it is integrated in Zoom these days. And again, be sure that you do the right disclaimers, that the participants are aware that the note taking is taking place. But it does great summaries and extracts, which you can, again, repurpose. And part of the work that you probably do is have a basic document or information, and then you can turn that into different formats. And well, an internal meeting is probably not the one that you're going to turn into a LinkedIn post, but some brainstorming session or other, you can take it as a baseline and use GPT to repurpose it into other formats.
And then the last point is about drafting, criticizing, and improving communication strategies. So whenever you have a strategic document, whenever you have a plan for doing things, you can simply put it in ChatGPT and say, sorry, review our current communication strategy, which is for a Brussels-based NGO focused on climate change advocacy. So again, providing some context, some background information, and then same thing, focusing on the audience, the tone of voice. What are you trying to extract from the specific strategy? What should be the recommendations? How should they be formulated? These are all the things that you can add in your prompt to basically ask AI to critique a specific document. What I also sometimes use it for is when I have a report, so sort of like an advertising report, an Excel sheet with a lot of data, so cost per click and all these things. You can simply take a screenshot, put it in ChatGPT, and ask ChatGPT to say, what are the key takeaways? What are the trends? What are the sparking, the positive results from this report? Just to have a sense of where you're going with your communication campaigns.
Just jump in for a second to say one idea is you can feed in either the screenshot, or perhaps if you have the Excel sheet, it's even more helpful, and instruct the GPT to say, pull or give me some non-obvious insights. And with this formulation, it's going to give you more analysis than a normal insight, because you look at the report, there are some really obvious things that strike you, but the non-obvious insight is something that may open your perspective to something you had not thought of.
Very good point. And we also wanted to share some examples of techniques that we've been using to improve our prompting skills. So the first one is obviously role prompting. You can give a role to an AI to say, for example, you are a communication expert, or you are an SEO expert focusing on a specific industry, right? So you can basically give a role to the AI, which is going to give the AI some constraints and limit it, which is going to help the AI then sort of produce better answers that are more tailored to that specific role. The second technique is impersonation. So let's say you have a bunch of content, you have some LinkedIn posts, and you want the AI to impersonate you. So to use that content as a reference to create new content, then you can simply do that using AI. So for example, if you have a specific style of writing, if you have specific words you're using, then AI can simply replicate that style for new content that you need to produce. A third technique that we really like is meta prompting. So if you're really not good at prompting and you just want to have a prompting engineer help you prompt better, then you can say, you're a skilled prompting engineer, help me create this prompt to do X, right? And so meta prompting means that you're prompting AI to give you a prompt so you can prompt it better. And then you have negative prompting, which is basically you're saying, please don't do this, please do that. So you're asking AI not to do a specific task. For example, you can say, I do not want a short response. I do not want a response in bullet points. I do not want you to focus on the specific audience. I want you to do X. And this sort of also limits the AI and forces the AI to think on a specific thing you're trying to make the AI do.
Maybe, Jack, I jump in for 1 second to highlight these, that you don't necessarily need to know all of this as long as you know what you don't know. And if that sounds a bit tautological, then let me explain. If you're aware that you have a certain shortcoming and say, well, I'm not sure how exactly to ask this question, as long as you have that realization, you can tell GPT to help you make it more concrete. So to say, I'm not sure which way to start that campaign, or I'm not sure what event we should organize to promote cancer awareness in the European Parliament. Give me some ideas. So as long as you notice the gap in your knowledge, you can ask GPT to help you realize and fill in that gap. And then you can follow that up with more concrete, more specific requests. And on that vein is not to expect 100% final proper answers. Well, for good measure, you have a job for a reason. So it's not that you want this tool to completely replace some of the stuff that you do. The more tedious recurring admin or other things which can be automated or can be done, sure. But a large part of that is to take me close enough to the solution, to the idea, give me a draft, give me a good blueprint, and I do the refining. I change those words, I add that tone, add that style, which the GPT may not know or may not get it right. So one idea that I wanted to share with you as Jacques was presenting his suggestions is that if you want to brainstorm, you can do that in a very cool way. There's even voice input. So if you're more comfortable saying it, sure. And to say, I'm going to give a couple of random ideas, the way I'm thinking about this, help me structure my own thinking from these random ideas that I'm going to present. And then AI can basically collate that information, distill the information, and give you back something that you can work with. So a lot of this takes you fairly close to the solution, to the option, to that social media post or image concept or draft press release that you may need to work on, but then you do the final touch. And if you're worried about hallucinations and poor results, right, that's one of the most frustrating things that we hear from participants, from those who are trying out AI. And honestly, that's one of the things that often turns you off and say, well, it's not as good as it's hyped to be. It could be far better. Well, there are certain techniques that you can apply to counteract that, to minimize it or completely get rid of this phenomena. So that would be 4 things. One is better data input in the prompt. So in the prompt, like Jacques mentioned earlier, you could say, well, use the following contextual information. You are a communications professional in a European, or let's say the EU office of this and this company. You can provide better data, but you can also provide factual data inside the prompt. Or if you look at the number 3, the knowledge base, you can feed in Excel sheets, you can feed in a PDF, you can put that knowledge in, it's going to be far better. You can instruct it to say, browse the web. These are, for open-ended questions, pretty good. So you can say, what are the main trends in using AI in communication in 2024? Browse the web to be sure that your input is well informed. So that is fairly generic. But GPT is not great at browsing the web, and it's not great at retrieving information in that way, at least for now. This is probably going to change. There's going to be updates to it. But many of you know the tool Perplexity, perplexity.ai. It's an amazing search engine where it basically pulls in information from multiple sources. So if you're looking for contextual or background factual information, do not use GPT. Use a tool like Perplexity, and then you can feed its information into GPT. And the last one is when you're working with PDFs or any background document, be sure to prompt it to say, when you're quoting something on whatever you provide as an answer, make sure you provide the page numbers or the paragraph in which it appears. So you explicitly request references in the answer, and that truly minimizes the hallucination. So this really means that you're not going to, you can cross-check it. You know where to find on page 34, paragraph 5, that piece of information, and then it's going to, you can make sure that it's not a hallucination. And to that vein, to that effect, don't be afraid of using it and experimenting with it. Also because AI will not replace your job, but someone using AI will or might. So this is a skill worth investing into. And not to use specifically GPT as Google, but as I said, Perplexity and some other emerging tools are really good at finding factual information if that is the goal. And then not to trust it fully, so trust but verify, so that principle applies. And that will work. And I see from Laura mentioning that you had bad experience with the references not being valid links. I'd say a lot depends on the prompt, how you instruct it, as to where you guide the AI's attention to pull the reference documents or reference information from. So if you say, here's a website, here's a Wikipedia page, here's a Parliament's website, here's a commission report, but best typically is to feed that directly into the tool and not just provide a hint at it or even a link, but feed that directly into the tool. So we have 6 more minutes, so we're pretty good with time, Jacques. I'm very glad that we have a bit of time to answer some questions that you are putting into it, though most of it we presumably have answered. But just to mention that we're available for workshops to go deeper and more personalized, more customized for your particular situation or team or issues. And we're available for speaking engagement online or in person, and for consultancy if we can guide you. And again, our perspective is that we are in the EU bubble and understanding how the institutions and those working around the institutions in the advocacy, communications, and similar fields work. And then we can point you to someone who's more of a technical expert if needed. But I think the main question is how to leverage the tool for your daily work and then find ways to use it in your teams and in your organization on a systematic level. And while we keep that on screen, I encourage you to fill out our questionnaire or feedback form. We'll be very grateful to hear more from you. So if Raquel, you can put that into the chat while we take some questions there. So Jacques, you want to address Seb's question?
So no, I haven't used any GPT model for reasoning capabilities. Maybe you can give us an example of a use case that you have for this specific case, and then we can see if there's anything we can answer.
Yeah. And let me answer Diana's question in the meantime, that you as comms professionals, you basically thrive on writing and simplifying information. So how can you ensure that you're not too tempted to go for AI? And the point here is not to replace your work with AI, is to augment your work with AI. I give you one example. If you are in a complex, technical, scientific field, then you need to communicate about it. And to some degree, I think all of you are, depending on the sector or industry. You do want to simplify it, and the first draft you can instruct GPT to say, well, turn this report on the EU's chemical strategy into a layperson's guide to understand the 15 most important points in it. So you can do that first draft, and then you can see and parse and decide what is the best way to work with that. And Eva is asking if difference between ChatGPT and Copilot. I haven't tested Copilot too much, but to the best of my knowledge, it's powered by GPT, so OpenAI's tool. So essentially, there's not much difference in that regard. Copilot's greatest advantage is its integration into the Office tools. So you can use it with Word, with PowerPoint, with others. So you can generate slides using instructions and using the power of GPT. Jacques, do you want to take Dylan's question?
Yes. So how to balance data protection and privacy. I think we mentioned it during this conversation. So making sure that the information you share is not private information or email addresses, names, or demographic, or very personal information. And also making sure that in the settings you check to make sure that the AI is not training your model, their model, based on your content. I think those are the two recommendations we have.
Right. What else? How do you balance protection and privacy with accurate, helpful answers?
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking what else. You want to take that, Jack?
The next thing we wanted to share is that we have a feedback form we would like you to fill in at the end of the event. So whenever this window closes and we disappear, there's going to be a feedback form, and this really helps us to improve our workshops. So if you have any comments, positive or negative, then we'd be happy to have them after this event.
But I did want to come back to it's a crucial point. So data protection, privacy with accurate, helpful answers. And it's not a binary issue. It's not that I'm not going to feed in anything because of privacy or data protection concerns. So I will cook with what I have. So I need to just use generic information that GPT has access to. So it depends on the nature of the background document, but there are certain things you can do is sanitize it to some degree, remove personally identifiable information. You can also do manually, and not using this system, but manually, some sort of a summary, some sort of a recap in a separate document with a couple of bullet points, which gives a certain context, not as detailed as the underlying document, but it gives you a certain context. And you feed that in. Right. So if you have this bulk of data that you're uncomfortable or legally forbidden from putting it into a system where you don't have 100% certainty that it's not going to be misused, well, you say, okay, what are the key points in it? What are the most important bits that I can turn into a secondary document and still feed that in to make my work or make the answers more helpful. We have 1 more minute, so Jacques, if you want to take that question, which seems a bit workier, so hopefully you had time to take a look at it while I was speaking. So over to you.
Yes.
In the last
so minute. The question is about how do you correct hallucination, I think, when it comes to creating your own custom GPT. The only thing I could recommend is to really go in the details and try to configure it as much as possible. So whenever you get the wrong answer, just say, do it again. Please carefully take your time, and that will necessarily help the system. It's something that I sometimes struggle with. So it's not a perfect system. But if you repeatedly say what you want and what you don't want, then hopefully that helps.
And just as a final comment on Samuel's message that he tried to build a custom GPT with a lot of data. Now, I'm involved in developing a few AI-driven projects like the one I mentioned and some others. And I do understand from the engineers that a lot depends on how you structure the underlying data and the very, very detailed and clear prompts that you give the system what to work with. So just simply these two, so the architecture of the background engine will determine how high quality the answers are. And a lot of nuances need to be configured for that to work the way you expect that to work. With that, we thank you so much for your time, for your attention. We really appreciate that. And I hope that this contributed a bit to your work and to your thinking, to your experimentation. If we can be helpful with anything, please let us know. And Jacques and myself, we're very passionate about this, as you probably heard. So we'll close it off at this time. The recording will be shared shortly and an extract of the slides. And with that, please let us know how it went, and all feedback is more than welcome. And hope to see you around soon.
Thank you so much. Bye.
And thank you for Raquel to help in the back. Thank you.